Kids deserve lifelong families that they feel that they belong to. If we're going to stop the pipeline into foster care, we've got to become a more effective leader in changing the environments for families and for communities. These are very difficult problems, but we can make some real progress if we're determined and patient and courageous enough to make sure that the ingredients of opportunity are within the reach of all kids in a way that allows them to realize their potential. And I think that we've only just begun here. We've got a very bright future. I fell in love with Jim Casey and with the culture he'd created at UPS. And what I came to discover was a man enormously grateful for the opportunities that he himself was given. A man who was remarkably generous with the wealth he was fortunate enough to accumulate. But I think what most appealed to me and continues to be a defining feature in the Casey Foundations is the humility with which he led, and it's been a model for all of us who've been lucky enough to use his legacy to make change in this country.
A manager came up to me and said, "Hey, don't you live in White Center?" And I said, "Yeah." Said, "Well, the foundation, Casey Foundation, is there. They're about to do some work for a few years there." And I said, "Really?" White Center has been known traditionally as this low-income kind of neighborhood. When the Casey Foundation came to town, they identified a group of residents and community leaders and said that they wanted to meet and talk about their work.
I think the next thing, based on what
the Casey Foundation's approach to partnering with communities and families is not to underestimate their own capacity and their own accountability for changing their futures.
We are going to define, as residents of a community, on how this foundation will exist here in White Center. I just thought it was the greatest thing. It's like, okay, all right, we're in the driver's seat around this work. There's a definite feeling and sense of pride in the neighborhood itself. People have ownership of things that are happening in their lives.
This foundation made a difference. They went into communities where people were disillusioned, were oftentimes feeling disconnected from government and sometimes from each other, and managed to make believers out of them.
2, 3, 4.
Doug understood very early in his leadership that the root cause of many of the problems we were addressing facing the most disadvantaged children in this country were about the conditions and circumstances of the places in which they lived and the consequence of those places for their families.
My job description was a sentence that said, perhaps we will explore low-income, distressed neighborhoods as another entry point for our systems reform work. And I was hired to see if that sentence could become a real element of the work. I think it was 1991. I was the 20th person on staff.
When I got there, it was a wonderful place to be, very vibrant, and a place where you could be really creative and unconstrained to think big thoughts. And Doug was the kind of leader who encouraged you to do that.
And so I would take staff to communities and kind of walk them around. Doug Nelson was the person that I brought to Central Harlem to spend a day, and Jeff Canada was introduced to the foundation.
They came in for a conversation, and I could not believe they worked for a foundation. Our thoughts were so closely aligned in terms of both the plight of poor children in this country and the solutions. That I kept, saying, I have to pinch myself because do these people really run a foundation? In certain places in our nation, children literally don't have a chance because so many things are going wrong. It's just not housing or healthcare or education or violence or substance abuse. It's all of that stuff piled on top of one another, and we keep trying to come in through one door thinking we're going to be able to help that child.
Which is healthier, fried chicken or sliced turkey?
Dang, sliced turkey.
We realized we had to figure out a way to surround these young people with a different set of opportunities and not just work with an individual child, but all of the children and families in an area. And we did that work very closely aligned with Annie Casey.
The critical mass of changes have to occur to really transform a community. And we haven't done that yet, but we are on the cusp of having a whole lot more pieces of the puzzle.
What day is today?
Friday.
Friday, very nice.
When we fill that in, we will reap the benefits of everybody's contribution over these last 20 years.
We have some data now that suggests this really is working. It's a national model that the president is talking about replicating.
The idea is that if everyone's involved and no one slips through the cracks, then you really can change an entire community. Jeffrey Canada, the program's inspirational, innovative founder, put it best. Instead of helping some kids beat the odds, the Harlem Children's Zone is actually changing the odds altogether.
I remember sitting in a meeting postulating how could we make the country aware of how many kids have dilemmas that they're dealing with that aren't being helped. And we said, well, what we need is some kind of a measurement system on how well kids are doing. And the more we talked, the more enthusiastic we got about it. And by the time that meeting was over, we decided that we were going to do Kids Count.
The first version of Kids Count was just a wall chart with an incredible array of data about kids and families. We mailed them to every state legislator. After 3 or 4 years of producing that, it began to dawn on all of us that this could be something much, much more important. It would be the gold standard for assessing every major social issue affecting kids and families.
But one of the great things that I always looked forward to was when they released the Kids Count report, and we would go to Washington, and it was engineered to actually penetrate across this nation a message around how we are failing our children and also what we can do to improve the conditions of those children.
We now can describe the condition of children and families over time, whether it's getting better and worse in every congressional district in the country. And I think just the process of measuring has made the country more accountable and more conscious of its need to make progress for kids and families.
Sinners will be running on that great day.
My mother originally was a foster parent for Casey, and I felt that was a good way to give back. When I first got them, Shakoya was 3, Patricia was 2, and Seema was 4 months old. Their mother was in a drug rehab, and they were only going to be with me until she completed the rehab. Well, that didn't occur. She kept relapsing. I'm doing pretty good here. I have 7.
It's not enough just to get a kid safe temporarily. It's only enough if we get a family permanently.
Go to jail. Once I found out that I was eligible to adopt them, I figured if I had done it this long, they were mine.
The real goal of the system should be to connect children who are in foster care to a lifelong family.
They could do anything. I told them, you mess up, I'm gonna be there. I'm not gonna love you any less, so go for it.
I was this bitter addict who felt like, oh, who the heck are you to take my daughter from me? The reality of it is that I could not take care of my children and use. I was lucky that they stepped in. I was lucky, that's all I can say.
Direct Services gives our work and our advocacy and our vision a kind of grounding in reality. We're just not talking about abstractions. We're talking about real kids who are in trouble.
She's my daughter too. Right, Wanda?
Yeah, of course.
She got two moms.
Rafaela Ortiz was my daughter's foster mother. This woman loved her like her own.
Because I got her when she got 2 months. Until she turned 4 years.
We've seen foster families who link up quite effectively with birth families and support them and build that bridge.
And so we raised her together now, and I'm perfectly fine with it. I'm perfectly fine with it. I wouldn't have it any other way.
We've seen over and over again that large systems can in fact change. They can change for the better, they can do right by every child. We have a long ways to go, but when you see a big system like this start to turn, it's really a remarkable thing.
It was really the New York example that inspired Casey to commit resources to what we call strategic consulting. We think that this consulting and technical assistance is a form of advocacy that will allow us to touch more children and more lives than we ever could directly.
I just wanted what everybody else, quote unquote, normal had, and I have that now.
For children that have families and have that stability, they have a safety net. For children that leave the foster care system without a family, they have no safety net.
What you know about a demon living in your soul, life and death, you can't get up out the hole.
My mom was heavily into drugs and alcohol, and she passed away when I was 8 of a drug overdose. My father was a real great guy, but he passed away when I was 13. My brother took me to Connecticut to get me out the Bronx because he knew the only way we were gonna go was jail or dead.
The kids that were aging out of foster care had so much higher odds of ending up homeless, ending up in trouble with drugs and with the law, that we knew that something was missing and was unmistakably visible in the failure of kids.
Eventually, I moved in with this family, and eventually I graduated high school, which was a very big deal to me.
We said, this is our chance to do some new things, take on some very hard problems.
Nice. And eventually, I came around. Casey provided a program, the Independent Skills Living program, which taught us how to shop for cars, shop for apartments, what to look for in those things, first aid, groceries. That had to be one of the classes that helped me the most to prepare for when I aged out. My worker always told me, though, if you ever need me, I'm here. You could always call us. They were always there for me.
A perfect picture. Well, I could paint it perfect of my facial expression to show the pain is hurting. Everybody around me is dying, I feel deserted.
Juvenile justice reform was one of the earliest of Casey's kind of initiative aspirations. In juvenile detention, we were not helping kids, we were harming them. So I had this notion that we could successfully, in fact, save some kids from the downward spiral.
What we found is that if you can find alternatives to detention, alternatives to incarceration, job supports, a lifelong family connection, that you can get that child off the delinquency track and back into a much more productive track.
The data there has been so overwhelming now in so many jurisdictions. And I think we showed that imagination leads to something that is incontrovertibly and documentably better for everybody involved.
We follow data where it leads. We've demonstrated a willingness to listen to diverse and even divergent points of view, and in the process, learn how to build a big tent in favor of strategies that blend research, views of practitioners, the voice and wisdom of the community into common sense solutions. And these have become points of pride for those of us who are associated with the Casey Foundation.
This is really about making sure at the end of the day, we've changed this country for the better for children.
About a year or two ago, when I would close my eyes and say, what's my daydream for the Casey Foundation? That daydream looked a lot like the way the Casey Foundation had become.
So I leave this job not at all tired, but as close as one can hope to be to fulfilled. Figure that's what they mean by quitting while you're ahead, you know?